Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving headfirst into something we use constantly, but maybe you don't think about enough, the amazing world of hearing and balance,
That's right.
and specifically, how these senses are deeply, intimately tied to your brainstem. It's kind of incredible when you stop and consider the complex machinery working away inside your head.
It really is mind-blowing. And the impact when things go wrong, well, it can be huge.
Absolutely. So that's our goal today, isn't it? To really unpack this.
Exactly. We're going to explore the ear's anatomy, trace how those sound and movement signals actually get to your brain, and crucially, look at the brainstem's role in all of this.
Okay.
We've gathered insights from, some solid research on neuroanatomy, stroke studies, basically trying to give you the key takeaways.
So you understand how it works and also why it's so fundamental.
And maybe what happens when that system gets compromised. It's vital stuff.
Right. It's astonishing the complexity packed into such a tiny area. So let's start at the beginning. The ear itself. We can start with the outer ear, the part you see, the ear flap, the canal leading into the eardrum. It acts like a funnel, doesn't it? Capturing sound waves.
Yep, gathers them up and directs them inwards. Then those waves hit the middle ear. Now, this is an air-filled space.
And that's where those tiny bones are.
That's them, the malleus, infurticus, and stapes. 3 of the smallest bones in your whole body. And they're not just sitting there, they act like tiny levers.
Amplifying the sound.
Exactly. They boost those vibrations significantly before passing them on. It's a really neat little mechanical amplifier.
Okay, so amplified vibrations then move deeper into the inner ear.
Correct. And now we enter this truly remarkable bit of biological engineering, the inner ear. It's housed deep inside the temporal bone.
Which you mentioned is the hardest bone in the body.
It is, yeah, for protection, presumably. Inside, it's often called a labyrinth. Think of it like a complex maze.
A maze. Okay.
And the key thing here is it contains 2 different kinds of fluid. There's the bony labyrinth, which holds a fluid called perilymph.
Perilymph. Got it.
And then, sort of floating inside that is the membranous labyrinth, and that contains endolymph.
2 fluids. Why 2? What's special about them?
Well, this is where it gets really cool. These fluids have very different chemical compositions. Perilymph is a bit like plasma or cerebrospinal fluid, while endolymph, well, it's actively secreted and it's rich in potassium, low in sodium.
The opposite of perilymph.
Exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
And this difference creates an electrical charge, like a tiny battery. It's called the positive endocochlear potential.
A battery inside your ear.
Essentially, yes. And this electrical potential is absolutely vital. It powers the sensory cells, these specialized hair cells.
Hair cells.
These are the mechanoreceptors. They're the ones that actually convert the mechanical energy, the vibrations from sound, or the movement from head tilts into electrical signals the brain can understand. Without that battery, no hearing, no balance.
Wow. Okay. And where are these hair cells located?
They're found in the 2 main sensory parts of this labyrinth. First, you've got the cochlea. It looks like a tiny snail shell all coiled up. That's purely for hearing. Then you have the semicircular canals, the utricle, and the saccule. Together, they make up the vestibular labyrinth.
And that's for balance.
That's all about balance and coordinating your movements, and all these parts rely on those amazing little hair cells to pick up the signals.
Incredible. All that complex machinery generating its own power.
Mm-hmm.
Just amazing. So how does all this information get from the inner ear, these signals? How do they reach the brain? It's not just a simple wire, I guess.
Definitely not simple. It's a dedicated nerve pathway, the vestibulocochlear nerve. You might know it as cranial nerve 8 or CN8.
Okay, CND.
It's the main sensory line carrying all this data to your brainstem. And interestingly, it's not just one nerve. It's actually 3 parallel nerves bundled together.
3 in 1.
Yeah. 2 vestibular nerves carrying balance information, and the cochlear nerve carrying the sound information.
Okay, so let's follow the sound pathway first. From the cochlea.
Right. So the hair cells in the cochlea fire off electrical signals. These signals travel along neurons whose cell bodies are clustered right there in the cochlea. Their fibers bundle together to form that cochlear nerve division of CN8. But the journey doesn't stop there. It's not a direct line to the sound area of the brain.
No, there are stops along the way.
Oh, yes. It's like a relay race. The signal goes first to the cochlear nuclei in the brainstem, then to the superior olivary complex, also in the brainstem, then up through the lateral lemniscus to the inferior colliculus in the midbrain.
Wow, okay. Lots of steps. CCS slim, I think I read somewhere.
That's the mnemonic. Cochlear nerve, cochlear nuclei, superior olivary complex, lateral lemniscus, inferior colliculus, medial geniculate body that's in the thalamus, and finally, via the auditory radiation, to the auditory cortex in your temporal lobe,
Where you actually hear it.
where you perceive the sound, yeah.
Hmm.
And each stop does some processing, refining the signal, extracting information.
That's fascinating. You also mentioned something about a cochlear amplifier.
Ah, yes. The outer hair cells in the cochlea do something quite amazing. They don't just detect sound, they actively amplify it by about 40 decibels.
So they boost quiet sounds.
Exactly. They help you pick up faint sounds, improve frequency selectivity. It's like a biological fine-tuner and volume booster rolled into one.
And how does the brain figure out where a sound is coming from?
That's another clever bit of processing, mainly happening in the brainstem, like in that superior olivary complex. For low-frequency sounds, the brain detects tiny, tiny differences in when the sound arrives at each ear. Microseconds count.
Okay. And for high frequencies?
For high frequencies, it's more about the difference in intensity or loudness. Your head creates sort of sound shadow, making the sound slightly quieter in the ear further away. The brain uses that difference.
And get this, I read that damage to just one side of the auditory cortex doesn't make you deaf.
That's right, because the pathways cross over multiple times, input from both ears reaches both sides of the brain. So unilateral damage to the primary auditory cortex mainly messes up your ability to localize sound. You hear it, but you can't tell where it originated.
Which would be incredibly disorienting. Okay, that's the hearing side.
Yeah.
Incredibly complex. But the ear's doing double duty, right? Balance.
Absolutely. Let's pivot to the vestibular system. This is where things get, I think, really interesting in terms of how we just, stay upright and navigate the world.
Yeah, how did that work? Same hair cells.
Same principle, yeah. Specialized hair cells in the vestibular labyrinth. The semicircular canals, utricle and saccule, detect movement and gravity. This info travels along those two vestibular nerves we mentioned earlier.
So what do the different parts detect?
Okay, so the semicircular canals, there are three. Oriented in different planes, they detect angular acceleration. Basically, rotational head movements, like nodding yes, shaking no, or tilting your head side to side.
Got it. Rotation.
Then you have the otolith organs. The utricle and saccule, they detect linear acceleration. Think speeding up or slowing down in a car or going up and down in an elevator.
Okay.
And they also sense your head's position relative to gravity. Are you upright, tilted, lying down? That's the otoliths telling your brain.
So all this information, linear, rotational, gravity, where does it go?
It all feeds into the vestibular nuclei, which are located in the brainstem, specifically the pons and medulla. Think of these nuclei as major integration centers.
Integration centers, meaning they combine this info with other senses.
Exactly. They combine vestibular input with visual input, with feedback from muscles and joints. And based on all that, they control some crucial reflexes.
Reflexes, like what?
Well, the big one is the vestibulo-ocular reflex, the VOR. This is amazing. It coordinates your eye movements with head movements.
Ah, so that's why I can keep looking at you while shaking my head.
That's the VOR in action. Your eyes automatically move opposite to your head movement to keep your gaze stable. Incredibly important for clear vision while moving.
Makes sense. What else?
Then there are the vestibulospinal reflexes. These adjust the posture muscles in your body, neck, trunk, limbs to keep you balanced.
So if I start to tip over.
Exactly. If your head tilts right, for example, these reflexes kick in to increase muscle activity on the right side, pushing you back upright automatically.
And there was one more.
The vestibulocholic reflex. This one specifically acts on your neck muscles to help stabilize your head in space. Often it works to move your head opposite to the direction your body is falling, sort of protectively.
Right. Okay, here's a question then.
Yeah.
What happens if one side isn't working right? You mentioned irritation versus loss.
Yeah, this really highlights how finely tuned it is. Let's say someone has a condition that wipes out the function of their right inner ear labyrinth. Their brain is missing input from that side.
Okay.
So the input from the left side becomes dominant, effectively signaling a constant turn or tilt away from the damaged side. The brain interprets this as falling towards the damaged side, the right, so they tend to actually fall to the right.
Wow. And if it's irritated instead?
Conversely, if that right labyrinth is irritated, say by inflammation, it becomes overactive. It sends too many signals.
Ah, so the brain thinks it's turning strongly towards that side.
Exactly. So the compensatory response is to try and push away from that perceived movement, meaning they tend to fall towards the left, away from the irritated side. Shows you the delicate balance of inputs.
That's a fantastic illustration. And it all comes back to that central processing unit, the brainstem, where these vestibular nuclei live.
Precisely. The brainstem midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata, it's the absolute hub for processing these auditory and vestibular signals. The cochlear and vestibular nuclei are right there in the pons and upper medulla.
And you mentioned blood supply earlier being critical.
Absolutely critical. The entire inner ear, plus both the facial nerve, CN6, and our vestibulocochlear nerve, CN7, rely on one single small artery, the labyrinthine artery.
Just one. That sounds risky.
It is a bit precarious, and this artery usually branches off the AICA, the anterior inferior cerebellar artery, or sometimes directly off the basilar artery.
Which are part of the bigger system supplying the back of the brain.
Right, the vertebrobasilar system. The vertebral arteries join to form the basilar artery, and this whole network supplies the brainstem, the cerebellum, the back parts of the cerebral hemispheres. It's a vital network.
So if you disrupt the blood flow there, particularly to that labyrinthine artery or the AICA or the basilar, the consequences could be pretty severe for hearing and balance.
Extremely severe. And this brings us to brainstem strokes. They make up maybe 10–15% of all strokes, but they are often the most dangerous, the most lethal.
Because the brainstem controls so many vital functions.
Breathing, heart rate, consciousness, plus all these sensory pathways. So yeah, damage here is serious, and we see specific syndromes that directly link vascular problems to hearing and balance issues.
Okay, like what? Can you give an example?
Sure. Take lateral pontine syndrome, sometimes called Marie-Foix syndrome. This happens if the blood supply to the side of the pons is blocked, often affecting branches of the basilar artery and AICA.
Affecting those nuclei we talked about.
Exactly. It hits the nuclei for the facial nerve, CN7, and the vestibulocochlear nerve, CNF. So symptoms typically include facial paralysis on the same side as the stroke,
Okay.
along with hearing loss on that side, vertigo, that spinning sensation, and nystagmus, those involuntary jerky eye movements.
Wow, very specific. Another example.
Another classic is lateral medullary syndrome or Wallenberg syndrome. This involves blockage, typically in the vertebral artery or PICA, the posterior inferior cerebellar artery, affecting the side of the medulla.
So lower down in the brainstem.
Right. This hits the vestibular nuclei again, so you get vertigo and nystagmus, but also cerebellar signs like ataxia or coordination problems on the same side, difficulty swallowing, difficulty speaking.
Dysphagia and dysarthria.
Correct. And interestingly, often hyperacusis, where normal sounds become intolerably loud.
Hyperacusis. That seems counterintuitive with stroke.
It does, but it likely relates to disruption of central auditory processing pathways, or perhaps altered function of the stapedius reflex pathway, which normally dampens loud sounds.
Fascinating. Are there other conditions that can cause similar symptoms by affecting blood flow?
Yes. Things like subclavian steal syndrome, where blood flow is essentially stolen from the vertebrobasilar system to supply the arm, can cause transient symptoms like vertigo or hearing loss,
Right.
or even structural things like a rare bony anomaly called the Kimmerer anomaly at the top of the spine, which can sometimes compress the vertebral artery and compromise blood flow, leading to, again, vertigo or hearing issues.
It really drives home how vulnerable this system is to vascular problems. The symptoms are almost like clues pointing to the location of the issue.
They absolutely are, which is why the neurological exam is so important.
Right. So let's talk about that. If someone comes in with dizziness or hearing problems, what does that assessment look like? What does this all mean for you, the listener, if you experience these issues?
Well, the first step is often a basic hearing check. Can you hear fingers rubbed together? Whispered words? Simple stuff. But then we use tools like tuning forks for the Weber and Rinn tests. These are classic bedside tests, but really useful for starting to figure out what kind of hearing loss it might be.
Conductive versus sensorineural, right?
Exactly. Is the problem getting sound into the inner ear that's conductive loss? Or is it a problem with the inner ear itself or the nerve that's sensorineural loss?
How do the tests tell them apart?
Okay, so the Rinn test compares hearing by air conduction holding the vibrating fork near the ear canal versus bone conduction placing it on the mastoid bone behind the ear. Normally, air conduction is much better, AC, BC.
Makes sense.
With conductive loss, sound bypasses the problem area via the bone, so bone conduction becomes better than air conduction, ECAC. With sensor neural loss, both are reduced, but air conduction is still better than bone, ACBC, just for a shorter time.
Okay. And the Weber test.
For Weber, you place the vibrating fork on the middle of the forehead or top of the head. Normally, you hear it equally in both ears. If you have conductive loss in one ear, the sound seems louder in that bad ear.
Louder in the bad ear. Why?
Because the conductive blockage masks ambient room noise, making the bone-conducted sound seem relatively louder in that ear. With sensor neural loss, the sound is louder in the good ear, because the damaged inner ear or nerve can't pick up the signal as well.
Clever. Are there more advanced tests?
Oh, definitely. Things like the auditory brainstem response, ABR test. This measures the electrical signals generated along the hearing pathway, from the cochlea right up through the brainstem nuclei.
So it can pinpoint where a problem might be along that pathway.
Exactly. It's really helpful for identifying neural lesions, tumors affecting the nerve, things like that, which might not show up on simpler tests.
So understanding all these mechanisms, from the fluids to the reflexes to the blood supply, directly informs how these conditions are managed.
Absolutely. It's key. For severe sensorineural hearing loss, for instance, knowing the cochlear nerve is potentially intact allows for cochlear implants. These bypass the damaged hair cells and directly stimulate the nerve endings.
A direct electrical stimulation.
Yeah, it can be life-changing for profound deafness. And thinking back to strokes, knowing the mechanism, usually a clot, an ischemic stroke, highlights the urgency.
Time is brain.
Time is brainstem, absolutely. Early diagnosis and rapid treatment with clot-busting drugs, thrombolysis, or physically removing the clot, mechanical thrombectomy, can make a huge difference to outcomes, minimizing disability.
And prevention is key too, I imagine.
Hugely important. Managing risk factors, high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, smoking, atrial fibrillation, all the things that increase stroke risk are paramount for protecting not just your brain in general, but these incredibly delicate and vital hearing and balance systems specifically.
It really has been an incredible journey today. We've gone from the outer ear through those tiny bones into the fluid-filled labyrinth with its electrical potential, followed the nerve signals up the brainstem pathways. It's just an amazing symphony inside us.
It truly is. The way hearing and balance are so intricately woven together and connected right into the core of the brainstem, it's fundamental to our experience of the world.
And seeing how vulnerable it can be, how a small blockage or anomaly can throw everything off, really makes you appreciate the precision.
It does. And maybe that leads to a final thought for you to take away from this deep dive.
Go on.
Consider how intertwined your senses of hearing and balance are with the very core of your brainstem. We've talked about how a relatively minor anatomical variation in a blood vessel or a bit of bone can potentially disrupt your equilibrium or affect your hearing.
Right.
So the provocative question is, what other subtle physical differences, things you're completely unaware of, might be shaping your perception of the world around you, influencing how you experience reality in ways you don't even realize?
That's definitely something to think about. The hidden architecture shaping our senses. A powerful note to end on.
Makes you appreciate the complexity.
It certainly does. Well, we hope this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for the wonders within your own head and maybe sparked some curiosity to keep exploring. Thanks for joining us.